Hello, and welcome to The Realm. I'm Dr. K, and I bring the psychology.
I'm Dr. D, and I bring the strategy. We are business psychologists and your guides to the executive realm, where we bring psychology and strategy together.
So you can bring your best to your C-suite, your teams, and your customers. Today, we are talking about confirmation bias in organizational decision-making and how scientific thinking and bias sensing can help teams and leaders avoid faulty decision-making. All right, let's get to work and do this.
Awesome. This is a great topic. I am passionate about it.
And tell me why.
It really affects decision-making in the workplace. I mean, first, let's talk about what it is. Confirmation bias is really seeking out information that supports your point of view and discounting information that doesn't support your point of view. Literally, it's a bias towards confirming information that supports the way you think about something. And this is dangerous in business because decision-making is led by leaders, and leaders who believe in a project or an initiative or a decision that's about to be made can really influence other people's perceptions about that decision and might be blinded by countervailing thought or warning signs that the decision isn't the right one to make. A leader believes that a decision is the right one. They might not have the people around them to stand up and say, you might want to think about this a little bit differently, or have you considered? It might not be a safe space. Or you can be led down a path of following a decision and then making a decision, and then after the decision is made, ignoring information or circumstances that may have changed behind that decision. So it can be pretty devastating.
Absolutely agree. And for the employees coming in and, maybe their boss or the leader has one thing that they're like, this is where we're going to go and this is how it is. And an employee coming in recognizing, ooh, this is a red flag, or maybe they have some either knowledge that the leader doesn't have and not feeling safe to either talk to them and or to just, hey, in a meeting, this is something that I read, or this is something that I heard or know. It would go against the leader. The leader may not like that. They may ignore it, which then turns into a cycle of not feeling supported by their supervisor, their manager, what have you. And it becomes a loop of, misinformation, a loop of not having the ability to communicate with each other. And highly important information can be missed.
Absolutely. Biases are nearly impossible to recognize in yourself. And they're really difficult to recognize in those that you trust, those people that you surround yourself with. Organizations, particularly well-established organizations that have a strong leadership management team that's been in place for a long time, they build up trust around each other. And that can become an echo chamber for similar thinking, similar ideas. It's difficult for a leader to look at someone that they trust and say, hey, have you really thought about this from the other point of view? The devil's advocate perspective is a really, really valuable one in this type of case.
Absolutely. As a therapist, I do the devil's advocate. I will come in and I'll say, I hear everything that you are feeling, everything that you saw. And, I might ask a simple question. Well, did you think that maybe that person had a really crappy day and took it out on you? And sometimes I get a yes, but a lot of times I get a no, I didn't think about that. My feelings were hurt right away. Yes, your feelings were hurt, but it's not always directed at you.
Right.
So not allowing yourself to, especially leaders, not allowing the ability to open up the lens. It is extremely important for leaders to have that laser focus on whatever goal they're trying to accomplish or whatever steps need to be done. However, if someone brings something in, it's important to at least, okay, let's open up the lens real quick. Does this fit in here? Does this not fit in here? Yes, it does. Okay, let's correct that. Thank you very much. No, it doesn't really fit in here. And they can close that lens back up. Very, very important.
In the case that you just brought up of somebody assuming somebody else's intentions, that's fundamental attribution bias, which is confirmation bias. somebody said something that you didn't like or didn't care about. So the immediate reaction was to discount that person, the person who's bringing you that information. That other person may have had very, very good intentions. But what ends up happening is if a leader continues to bring a strong point of view about a topic, they essentially close other people off to countervailing points of view. I think about those failures in organizations like Kodak or Blockbuster Video that really just surrounded themselves with ideas that supported that their industry was going to remain consistent and that the decisions that they were making were the right one. Even when the writing was on the wall, the internet was developing so quickly, Blockbuster just really ignored it.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to know what your goal is, but you need to see if it's fitting in with everything that's going on. Bringing in, with the Blockbuster, it's, hey, people are going to streaming. This is really starting to get big. I remember back when going to Blockbuster on the weekend was the cool thing to do. And you see your friends and, oh my God, I hope I get that. Used to hide the CD or the DVDs, behind one that wasn't really, supposed to be the one so I could get what I needed or whatever. It was a beautiful concept. However, times change. You have to change with it. And if you sit there and go, nope, we've been able to make this, we've done good this way, it's not allowing room for the change. It's not allowing room for discovery of something new. And you might be able to confirm everything, movies are still going to be there. People are going to still want to rent movies. They sure will, but they're not going to want to get off their couch.
Right.
Just because your business may have done well this way, things are going to change and you have to change with it. And that doesn't just mean your business model, or the strategy itself. It's changing within the company. It's changing on the micro level as well as the macro level.
That's a really great point. As leaders think about decisions that they're going to make, they're often supported by analysis and research around that decision. And it's very, very common for organizations to prove that the decision is the right one rather than using the scientific method and trying to prove where the analysis or where the decision might be flawed. Really strong organizations approach a decision by looking at every option that's available to them and really trying to poke holes in their decision-making process and try to find the flaws, because not every decision is perfect. And as a leader, when one walks into the decision-making process believing that it's the right strategy and all of the analysis supports that strategy, then you're very clearly missing something. Your decision needs to be fully vetted by knowing what are all the other decisions that could be made, including doing nothing, and modeling out or thinking through those benefits and cons of alternate decisions so that you can make sure the decision you're making has been fully fleshed out and that you're walking into a decision very clearly knowing the downside risk.
You want to find the data that says maybe not so much so that you can be prepared whenever you're putting together whatever it is that you're looking to change or add into the company or even start a new company. You want to look at that data and go, well, if this is everything that's against what we're going for, we want to have either a plan to attack that, or we want to figure out how to change that one little thing so that it is not going to be implemented in with the plan. We're already prepared for it.
Right.
Everybody wants to be right. There is a little bit of self-esteem and confidence. If something that you bring in and someone says, yeah, I'm not so sure, that hurts. That's annoying. From a perspective of a therapist, I often hear they didn't hear what I had to say, and now I have imposter syndrome. And that doesn't mean that you did anything wrong. It doesn't mean that that you weren't onto something. But it's going, okay, I'm on to this, but these little things could, as you said, poke holes in it, and we need to be prepared for them.
The countervailing point is a preparation mechanism. If you have a strong leader over a decision that needs to be made, you need to have a strong leader whose sole purpose is to challenge that other leader's decision-making process and make sure that you have thought through all the eventualities. That person who is assigned to be the devil's advocate needs to continue that process even after the decision's made and continue to reevaluate. For an organization, particularly one where the leadership team wants to project an air of unity and consistency among the leadership team, it can be viewed as there's an outlier. There's somebody who is not working with the team. They're working against the team.
Right.
If this challenge perspective isn't part of the culture. So it's really important to be clear and articulate. This is part of our culture. We will make a decision and we will move forward with a decision, but we also want to create a safe environment where people can challenge a decision and work through the consequences if the decision goes the wrong way and really think through every eventuality. A way that I like to do this when I'm working with leaders is to set up a war game. So you have a leader that's pro-decision. You have another leader that says over a small team of thinkers, and you say, we're going to pretend that you're supporting this decision. We're going to pretend that the opposing side is your competitor, and they're going to try to destroy that decision, or they're going to try a different strategy that could undermine this strategy for the organization, and put them in separate rooms and let them come up with their strategies without knowing what the other is doing. You can often find deal breaker consequences that can be considered and rolled into your strategy, but that may also bring a completely different approach to a problem that you thought you had pretty well worked out.
That's really important, especially separating them, and making it into a game. I mean, it's a strategy, but making it into a game, because then it's like, I want to win. It brings a lot into, let's say, the conference room or the war game room or what have you. Part of an issue, as you were saying that comes to mind is, I brought up self-esteem and confidence earlier. Well, separating the two teams allows each team to feel confident when they're, working together to go against. And that way it's not where it's one person against one person. It's like, as a team, we thought of this. As a team, we thought of this. And they're going together, which would help to decrease some of that. Well, they don't like me, so that's why they went against it.
Right.
To take out that self-esteem level, that ego, taking out the ego, going, okay, this is about the company. We're trying to make sure we're making the right steps, because ego can make or break every situation that anyone's in, whether it's personal or professional. It can make or break. So allowing that ego to come out and then coming in and then having after it's all done, a strategy to fix whatever holes were able to be poked. That would be, to me, that sounds like that would lead to a lot more teamwork.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a really great strategic planning exercise, but it really doesn't stop there. Decisions gain momentum. So once people are on board and they start rolling forward, a lot of folks just blindly continue to follow, and circumstances may change, particularly in a dynamic environment. Things are always changing after a decision is made. So it's really important, the momentum of that decision, that there's not confirmation bias continuing to support. There needs to be really clear, carved out voices that can continue to challenge the decision and say, we made this decision to do a merger, 2 years ago, and we've been pursuing it pretty heavily. The board's on board, but is it still the right decision? Right. It shouldn't take some massive externality to cause leadership to stop and think for a moment. That should be happening continually. Every decision, every critical decision for an organization should continue to be reevaluated. If people are raising their hand and asking a lot of questions or raising issues that they think might be red flags, it takes a lot of courage for an employee to do that. And it takes really good leadership to stop and reevaluate. It's tough to reevaluate a decision that's already been made. And it's really challenging to look for information that might go against that decision that was already made. But if a good leader can bring in new facts and new issues and should feel very confident in raising their hand and saying, this doesn't feel right. Something is going on here. And, another way to counter that is before a decision is made, figure out all those things that are quote unquote deal breakers or big concerning things. What would cause you to change your decision at the outset? And those become a set of guideposts along the way. Because what really happens is you can think of 7 or 8 or 9 things that would definitely break the deal. Competitor does X. The financial investment is going to be bigger than we were expecting. The return is not going to be great. But what happens is after you make a decision and little things creep up here and there, a little bit of scope creep, a little bit of cost increase, the competitor took a different approach than what you were expecting. All of those things individually might not change the outcome of your decision if you had known them at the beginning, but together they could have changed the outcome of the decision. So if you very clearly define what those deal breaker items are, those red flags that you'll be looking for along the way, and then measure those red flags and say, hey, you know what? We've had 3 red flags trip. We've had 1 red flag trip. We need to get together and reevaluate this decision. And then for posterity, continue to say, well, now the cost has increased a little bit. The competitor has done something a little bit different. And, the return is not going to be as great as we thought, but just by a little bit. And if those trickle out over the course of a year, you might not pick up on the pattern. But if you have somebody who is saying, you know what, we've tripped 3 of our red flags, we need to stop this decision, a great leader will stop a decision in motion and say, we've already spent the money. That's true. Some cost is a thing, but we can't continue to throw good money after bad. And it's a great leader that will stand up and say, we've tripped all these little red flags.
Right.
Individually, they weren't a big deal or they didn't seem like a big deal, but we said at the beginning that these were a big deal. So we need to stop and we need to rethink this decision.
Right. Collectively, they might be small, but collectively they get a bit larger.
That's absolutely right. And that's why so many organizations end up spending a lot more money on a merger or a significant project. The scope starts to balloon or the costs start to expand. And it's really, really difficult for a leader who has staked their career and their reputation on a big decision to say, you know what, maybe this wasn't the best decision. Or knowing what we know now, the circumstances have changed. We need to reevaluate the decision. It may still be worth it to continue to move forward, but you can't let your own confirmation bias or the commitment that a leader has made to a broader team get in the way of stopping a potentially disastrous decision.
Absolutely. And on the employee side, it's also important for them to, if they, and this would also, be important that the company itself or leaders create a safe space for their employees. But if they're trucking along and an employee sees something or recognizes, as you called it, the red flag, or just happens to know that this company is doing something else because maybe they read some information, it is important for the employees to speak up as well. Because you don't want to be in the midst of, as you said, a merger, an acquisition, and then something major happens where the whole company crumbles, then you're out of a job because you kept quiet.
Hindsight's always 2020.
Oh, yes.
There will always be people who didn't support a decision at the beginning and then after, where you look back and say, oh, I knew it all along that this was going to go bad, or I knew it all along. Yeah. But I didn't feel confident in speaking up, or I told you so. Exactly. Yeah. This is a challenge. And it often, again, another type of undermining confirmation bias is when a group of employees don't like change. And in hindsight, they go, oh, look at all the things that are going wrong, and make a huge deal about challenges that are coming up along the way as confirming their belief. So confirmation can be a double-edged sword, and it's difficult for leaders to separate where are good ideas coming from, who are folks that are just to change and that sort of thing, that are leveraging the confirmation to support their negative perceptions.
Right. And you were bringing up how, employees have, they'll be like, oh, I knew it. I knew this wasn't going to be the right decision. There's a part, when we're researching, let's take politics, for instance, people will research what they want to look for, no matter what side of what side they're on, they go for the headlines that state all those things. So that is an active part that they are playing in the confirmation bias. And employees, even if they don't agree with a change, and if they decide to, if they make the active decision to not say anything, and they might be doing that because they don't feel comfortable with their supervisors, which is not creating a safe space, and that part would be on the leaders. But if the employees themselves take an active role to confirm, we honestly would not be able to. That's a catch-22. Well, yep, I just sat back and watched, and it confirms everything that I thought. But if you hadn't sat back and you'd actively participated in whatever the changes are and just went with it because this is what's going on, as long as it's all appropriate and ethical and all of that stuff, then we don't really know if whatever changes were coming about actually wouldn't have happened if everyone had participated. Someone that doesn't, that just kind of sits back and relaxes, so to say, they are actively going against it, whatever the change is, and we don't know if that change might have succeeded.
Yeah, that's where employee engagement is so important. Those employees sitting back and watching and waiting, there might be a healthy amount of skepticism in those employees, but
Perfect.
Those employees that are sitting back and waiting for your decision to crash and burn are not the ones that you want on your team.
Right.
1. 2, what caused that employee to become jaded in that perspective? Is it because they've raised their hand a number of times in the past and didn't feel listened to, didn't feel heard, so they gave up?
Yep.
That's a pretty awful place to be as an employee, and that's a pretty awful place to be as a leader of people, having people on your team. Now, you're always going to have a small minority of folks that are disengaged or disinterested or not really interested in the progress of the organization or the alignment of the mission. But your culture can't facilitate that. But I would argue that having a strong culture around bringing up issues and playing devil's advocate and challenging decisions and continuing to refine and improve based on whatever those circumstances are around a decision sets a culture that makes people feel more heard and actually improves your engagement of an organization.
Absolutely. And that's going to be on the part of any of the leaders, whether you are low-level management, middle management, upper management, that's your part to play. With some of the research that I've been doing with employee engagement and leadership styles, everybody's like, transformational, that's the way to go. But they've, surprisingly, people will always say, oh, transactional. Nope, they're all, dictatorship and stuff like that. But there's actually research that shows that depending on the leader themselves, transactional is not always a negative. It's not always a negative leadership style. So that would go against that would be a confirmation bias. If we're just looking at transactional is always bad and don't look at the other articles that are out there stating, well, depending on who the leader is, depending on what's going on, sometimes transactional is also helpful. But it is up to the leaders all together. Sorry, that was a tangent. But it is up to the leaders to, if someone looks skeptical or if someone raises their hand, even if you know that there's a chance, even if you're not sure, I can't say that you will know what they have to say is not going to be beneficial. It's always important to allow that person to speak. 1, because maybe they do have a good idea. So you want to listen. And 2, it's, even if what they bring up does not get used, you created a safe enough space where they're like, okay, my boss didn't use what I had, but they thanked me. They repeated it back, reflective listening, and they heard what I had to say. So I'm comfortable enough to bring it back in, especially if I do see a red flag. If we are cruising down this new change and all of a sudden it's like, ooh, this data that's coming in is not working or something over here, even though their first original idea didn't get heard or used or what have you, this new red flag that pops up, they can be like, hey, boss, this isn't looking good. So you want to create that trust.
Some employees, they have a negative bend to their perspective. Mm-hmm. They tend to challenge all the time. And it's tough for a leader when that person raises their hand to not apply confirmation bias to their own thinking, that before whatever comes out of their mouth next, they're not already thinking, oh, here's this person again. Confirmation bias can cause a leader to discount good ideas from that person just as much as routine nagging or negativity or whatever that perception is that person creates around them. And frontline employees and middle managers are all on a development journey for their own growth, bringing those types of things to their attention and say, I have a really hard time taking your feedback sometimes because you usually bring a negative perspective and I have a hard time hearing that. So I have a hard time disconnecting the good ideas from general complaining, which I do perceive sometimes as general complaining. Help me understand. How can we get through this? How can I help you develop as a professional? And how can you help me really get the good ideas out of what you're trying to communicate?
It does place extra work on the leaders to have to, okay, let me go in, let me ask these questions. It's really not that difficult to say, hey, I didn't fully understand what's going on here, and this is how I usually hear it. Explain it to me more. Explain it again. The time it takes to ask an employee or even an employee asking a leader to clarify something, with that clarification, it may make the consequences a lot less.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. By taking the time and listening to a challenging or dissenting voice, you're making sure that you're not locked into a confirmation bias path. You are continuing to develop engagement and trust with the team. And you could identify something large or small that could save the organization money, time, or frustration in a decision that's already underway.
Right.
Couldn't agree more. So, Dr. K, how can leaders prepare?
Oh, there's a lot of ways for leaders to prepare, and again, not taken away from the leaders. It is a lot more, you do have a little bit more work to do, but, just remember that, everyone's going to have their own bias. It's pretty much impossible to say, okay, no one have a bias to anything that we are bringing up. And, sometimes if employees, they have a group or an employee with a leader, they kind of have a little connection. They are going to be more biased with each other. They're going to collaborate on the bias with maybe not even recognizing that that's going on. So it's important to recognize, okay, this is what my friend says, but is this really the right thing to go? So it's very important to look between the lines, so to say. Also, it's try as much as possible to build that, like you use the war games, let two teams come together and kind of poke holes in it. Allow room for that. That's very important to allow room for that. When you're building that system, it's, set your decision priorities and outline any deal breakers before the decision is made. It's okay. These are the things. If this comes up, we need to change it around. If it doesn't, great, but it's allowing room for that flexibility. Always, communication as a therapist, as a human being, and in the business, communication is key. Open, clear, concise articulation. Don't beat around the bush. Just right away, just say what is going, what you think the outcome will be to each decision. And also, again, leave room for that variability, the variation and things that might come about. You want to make sure that, as a leader, yes, you are the boss. And it does kind of, to some extent, it is like, how dare you, challenge what I'm saying? But we don't know if they're able to see it what the challenge is, they're seeing it from a different set of eyes. They're seeing it from a different set of values. So that's going to be really important for leaders to allow room. Now, of course, this is all with respect to each other. So you want to make sure that's there. And watch out for the decision momentum. Provide safe space for the second guessing, and always the red flags. If a red flag comes up, listen to the person that is bringing the red flag up, because they might have seen something that someone just happened to miss. And then any leader, on top of all of that, any leader can make the decision. A good leader, adapts to the conditions around supporting decision change, and also reassesses the decision and what potential outcomes might come about, and also what challenges that we might have as well. To me, there's a lot of emotional intelligence that has to go on as a leader. However, you don't have to do all the work if you create a safe space for your employees. The employees will come to you if you allow them to. So, Dr. D, what is on tap for next week?
We're exploring the idea of micromanagement and a concept of locus of control. We'll be exploring what it says about leaders, the dangers for teams, and how to break this trust, control, micromanagement cycle that you may have in your organization.
Oh, yes, this is an amazing topic. And to all of you joining us on this journey in the realm, thank you very much. I'm Dr. K.
And I'm Dr. D, and we're looking forward to your next visit to the executive realm.